Hey guys, this is the V-Man from No Budget Productions, and with me today is Samuel Cockings, or Commander Cockings. That's what you're known as on Trekyards?
Well, I've been given the rank, given the promotion, but I haven't promoted in 6 years. So it started strong. It hasn't quite continued. I should be Fleet Admiral really or something. I don't know.
Well, in all honesty, Commander Riker was commander for what, 15 years? So
Yep. Happy to be on a good ship and a good crew. Like, believe me, as soon as he started getting live, my brain went to, he doesn't say Captain Foley. Why does he say Captain Foley? I was like, straight on his own. You got me there for a second.
Well, one of these shows, because this is what I've dubbed Samtober. So you never know. One of these shows, we may have Captain Foley pop up, surprise you. You never know. So, but we've got Sebastian, aka Space Daddy, who says pizza. Well, that's kind of what we're known on the show is good old pizza rolls. It's kind of a passion of mine. I didn't get fat off eating salads, so it's we got to keep the good stuff around here. And then Carl Faulkner says, hey, well, right back at you, Carl. Thank you for joining us. And anyone that joins us on the rewind, thank you for joining us. But with me today is you guys, if you don't know, I can't imagine you wouldn't. This guy, he's half of the duo on Trekyards. Wonderful CGI artist and just an all-out amazing trekker. Sam Cockings. Before we were on the show, we were talking about somewhat about some modern Star Trek stuff. We were talking about Lower Decks. Before we start delving into your fan film, Temporal Anomalies, let's talk a little bit about modern Trek. What's you do a lot on Trekyards, looking at ships, dissecting some of the trailers. What's your take on modern Star Trek as opposed to what we call classic Trek?
Yeah, on Trekyards we started with the ship breakdowns, and then we spent literally years doing ship breakdowns with the guests that worked on the shows and even some fans as well. And then the new shows came out, and we were there from the first trailer. And then as we got into the episode reviews, we started analysing more things like the costumes and the makeup and things. And we, often can release one video a day per that new episode that comes out on varying topics, on theories. And Picard, we were doing 2 a day for the first 3 because it was so dense. And so we've done thousands of hours of conversations on this stuff. And I think that's a really great library. If you want to know what people thought at the time, we'll go in and check. And the prediction ones are extra fun because they were proved wrong or right instantly. And I remember I guessed a big chunk of the season finale of Lower Decks season 1 in our live. I guessed like 3 very key jokes based on the teaser that hard to tell, like he's going to do that. So we've kind of really gone into it. And certainly modern Trek is getting better all the time, which is great. But when you have an initial creator, Brian Fuller, who had a direction, and then the powers that be said, we don't want this direction, he gets ousted, all the money's spent on his direction, and then all the fans say, oh dear God, look at the visuals. Well, you can't unspend 100 million on all those things. And so they had to continue the ship. And it took 3 years for them to actually sort of reset into something they wanted to make. Season 3, which was enjoyable, still with some legacy problems season 1 and 2, but enjoyable. And then Picard was clearly a Michael Chabon production. It wasn't his story, but he brought his own father's illness into it and a lot of personal darkness, which certainly came across. And they have Lower Decks, which was made by a Trek fan for Trek fans with Trek fans in mind, and it's great.
Well, that was I think each season with Discovery got progressively better. The first season, I think it was a problem with being 2 seasons worth of material kind of crammed into what you had. The Klingon War, which could have been its own season, and you had the Mirror Universe, which could have been its own season. And I don't really know anyone that loved the look of the Klingons. But when you get to season 2 and then they add the long hair to it, that kind of retroactively fixed that one aspect, which you can kind of forgive.
Well, they've never talked about it again or shown them again, and they're never going to use those Klingon designs again. So it's one of those things where, just like in TOS, there's a Tholian ship, they kit bashed into another alien ship, and it's just a reverse within a cells. It's like, not canon anymore. So some things you just move on from, like those Klingons. Never going to see him again in that way, and that's great. You shouldn't.
Thank goodness. but by the time you get to season 2 of Discovery, you got Captain Pike, you got some of the TOS looking uniforms, which I think everybody. I don't know many people that hated those uniforms. But then you get to season 3, and again, like each season just got progressively better in terms of story writing. The only knock on season 3 I feel was where it was I forget the race that Saru's race was. Yeah, it was the Kelpian guy that caused the burn. That was the only thing where I was like, that's kind of a letdown. Outside that, I think everything else was great. The 32nd century, it was kind of a soft reboot for everything.
Every season's a soft reboot for Discovery, but they finally got it right. I mean,
yeah.
Season 3 is the first season where they actually wrote the entire season before they started filming. And they had an entire thing, and even you can tell a lot of the things that people complained about at the time, the small things like, what's the point of this scene or that character? Whereas if you come from a filmmaking perspective, you can say, oh, that's a season 4 setup, because they were also designing season 4 during season 3, and so they actually have this oversight finally, whereas season 1 was rewrote in the middle and then given 3 more, and then and then Discovery season 2 was halfway shifted showrunners, so they had to, the ending's not what they planned, and so you can see that. And even if you remember the Red Angel, which is an absurd concept, but they by the last episode forget there's 3 signals they've not talked about yet, and so they just, oh yeah, the red signals, this and this, because the initial showrunners had an idea for all 7 signals. Then the new showrunners forgot about it and had to retcon something stupid in the last minute because they forgot about it.
Right.
Yeah, planning, guys, real important. And same thing for Picard. A lot of those problems stem in Picard as well. The producers telling everyone involved, okay, turn the first 2 episodes into 3, which then makes you lose 1 episode of story later on. Add Nepenthe, which takes away another episode of the story. And we're going to kill Jean-Luc Picard in the last minute. Let's change the ending. And we're going to swap Riker in. You've now lost 2 episodes, made an episode of filler, added Riker in, removed the ending, killed your lead character, none of which was planned at the start of the show. You wonder why it feels a bit, well, this doesn't make sense.
Jumbled, yeah.
Yeah, because it just wasn't designed that way. And the fact that Patrick didn't know he was going to die until 2 weeks before he shot tells you he didn't have a plan and tells you they didn't pitch him the real idea for the story, because you don't kill your main character 2 weeks before shooting when he's kind of locked in. He can't say no, can he, really, at that point?
Yeah, it felt the problem with Picard, besides it being kind of overly dark, and the thing about it is, like, I don't mind grim storytelling. I feel like if that's your goal, end on a happy note, I understand that. But the problem with Picard is, like, and that, it was the same problem that I had with Discovery, even through the first 2 seasons, is I don't feel like I got to know any of the characters. I feel like everything was kind of just fluff. And it was overly dark and it was fluff. I didn't feel like I got to know any of the characters. I barely knew most of their names, and that was something with Lower Decks. Is I feel like I know the characters even watching just like 2 or 3 episodes. And that's good writing to me. Even if it's not your cup of tea, you know the characters by the end of the episode. It's good storytelling. Before we head to your films, I do have one question, because I'm a uniform guy. I know that you've seen some of my films, and you know that I put myself in different eras. That's large part
different. Yeah, a few.
Yeah, it's just because I like putting myself in different uniforms. What do you think about the new uniforms that they have for Strange New Worlds? Because a lot of people it's hit, a lot of people it's miss.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Question. So I'm intrigued. There's 3. They're sort of hidden in the trailer. There's the new medical one, there's the Spock one, and there's the number 1 away team jacket. We don't know what to call it yet because it's so distinctly different. Weirdly, the number 1 looks like the Axanar jacket, give or take, mostly. The main one looks like a sort of an unnecked TOS with the Beyond fabric, and the Matumba one is very close to what it should be, just a different cut. I need to know the context of those, because which one's the primary one? Uniform is uniform. You shouldn't have 3 and the whole crew wearing different ones.
Right.
Discovery uniform is awful because it doesn't fit. It's fine, but it doesn't fit. That's the biggest problem, because continuity is very important. The Enterprise uniforms are better, but they're still just the Discovery uniform, but the top's now 1 color. So the slight flaws of the patterning is still there. But they are crisper than the new ones. The new ones feel a lot more thin. when you've got the neck, it feels a lot more smart. So we'll see. It's a symbolic. We know we can move into TOS more. We can do what the fans need. But I'll wait until we see them all because they all look different in the uniform. I wish they were thicker. I wish they had the collar. We even did a Photoshop and the collar just improved it to no end. But then we see Nurse Chapel in a Discovery version medical, which they wouldn't have at this point because medical aren't white in this era. So we're thinking there might be some transitional time in the story to kind of explain some things. That's us always hoping, But they're okay. They're okay.
See, I think we lost you, Sam. Yep, I think we lost you, Sam. Hmm. Hmm. Well, we'll give Sam some. Yep, there we go. He's back in the. There we go.
Sorry, slightly died there.
That's okay, man. It happens. That's what happens when you're live. So Carl Faulkner asks if he can ask a question. By all means, Carl, just put it in the chat, and I'll ask it whenever it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
My thought on it is it's kind of if we hadn't have already seen the Cage uniforms, this kind of seems to be kind of a backtrack because you saw like the no collar with the Cage era, and then you saw the collars with the Discovery Pike uniforms, and then we're back down to no collar, and then we know we're going to end up with the Captain Kirk collar. So it seems like a no collar, collar, no collar, collar. It just seems like a zigzag type of where we're going with it. And for me, it would be different if we hadn't seen the Discovery Pike uniforms and we had gone to Cage era and then the Strange New Worlds and then the Pike Discovery. To me, that would have been like an evolution of where we're going uniform wise. So to me, it just seems kind of off unless this series is like a prequel. Then it would be like, okay, then it fits. So to me, it's just kind of context of what we're doing.
Well, I mean, any prequel is right itself into a corner because we know in the Cages, we've seen the short trek where they're in the Discovery version of the uniforms pre-Cage, which means they start in that uniform, go to Cage 2 years later, 4 years later, Cage, after Cage, they're back into the same uniforms again for season 2 of Discovery. And then between 2 and 4 years later, they're now going to be in these uniforms. And then between 3 and 4 years later, back into Cage variants, because that was what Stranger World, the second pilot was, and then into TOS. So they've really like.
Yeah, it's zigzag. Oh my God, I can't even say it. It's all over the place. Is what we're saying.
Yeah, I'm just going to see the sets. Because a lot of that stuff that's the stuff that they can't change for money. The uniforms they can iterate on, but I'm intrigued to see because it's still the same people in charge as the first 2 seasons, and we've seen what their TOS looks like. It ain't TOS looking, so we'll see. We'll see.
So Carl asks, before we delve into the main course of the show, Carl asks, what is your, he says fracture starship, but I think he meant to say favorite starship. What is your favorite starship?
Well, my guilty pleasure number 1 is the Prometheus from Prometheus, which is right there, because it's just, that episode as a whole is fantastic. And so that just, like as a package, is really cool. And I've since worked on, I've talked to Rick Sternbach for literally 2 hours about the design on a Trekyards recording, which was a hell of an experience. But obviously the Enterprise refit is kind of the ultimate in movie quality Enterprise. But the original Connie has got its own charm. Enterprise E is beautifully sleek. I've done hundreds of space effects with her, and she's very, very nice. So you kind of got to split to era, really. But those are kind of my top famous ones. And Klingon Bird of Prey is always iconic. And I guess it's look at the wall. There's the other ones I really like because I've got quite a plethora of choice, really.
It's all there, huh?
It is, and Defiant's good. I mean, that's the thing. They've been so lucky. The iconic ones, the hero ones, they've really nailed out the park. But yeah, nail on the head. There you go. They've been very lucky, but good for them.
I think the Defiant, like the first time for me, I was blown away when it decloaked in front of DS9. You're just like, whoa, a Federation ship decloaking, that's awesome. And then the first time it fired in front of the Jem'Hadar, and you're like, what the hell is that? You know, like it was fucking unbelievable. You know, like wow. You know,
those pulse phases are no joke.
Yeah, I mean that was just the definition of badass in Star Trek. You know, you're like, wow, this is a warship. Like this is what it can. This is what it can do. Like that's cool.
Well, if you like the Defiant, check out my short film, One Small Step, coming for the end of the year.
Wow, plug, guys, check it out. So speaking of,
but based on what you said specifically, you'll like it.
So speaking of films, the one we are here to talk about today is Temporal Anomaly. Now this film, for those of you that don't know and haven't watched it, go check it out. It's 2 parts. Each one is about 25 minutes or so. And we're going to be talking about spoilers here. So if you guys haven't seen it and you're watching it live, stop watching me. I'm not important. Go watch the films and then come back, watch this on the rewind. And if you're watching on the rewind and you haven't seen it, pause it, go watch that, come back, finish this. Either way, go watch those films, leave a comment, like, subscribe to him, then come back. So we're going to be talking about spoilers. So here's your warning. The film is about this guy who wakes up and there's this anomaly. Ship's abandoned. It's kind of a Twilight Zone-esque type. What the hell's going on? No crew. I can't figure out what's going on. Then these ships start appearing. He starts talking to them, and they're from different times. And then this kind of wacko captain, you know, starts attacking him.
Wacko, but he gets wacko by the end. It's very reasonable at the start. I was very careful on that.
We have very loose definition of the word reasonable. I don't.
What's his first 10 lines? He's reasonable.
Well, by the time he's like, "Hello," yeah, that's reasonable. You know, that's that's like the burglar saying hello before he's like, "Give me your money," and stabs you. So yeah, the burglar was nice.
Just because you know where it goes. Just because you know where it goes.
So it's very much it starts off a mystery, and the mystery is kind of sidelined for a survival type, Twilight Zone-esque, just all around adventure. And the mystery is still there, but then about 3/4 into the film, it takes you for yet again another left turn.
Hard left. Yep.
Yeah. And
everyone dies. Everyone gets killed in front of you.
Well, and the thing is, and I will say this: at the end of the first part, at the end of part 1, I will say, I wouldn't have put it past you for you to have actually killed the guy. Just because I mean, I like stories like that where you know it's not uncommon to kill the main character and then move on. 2, I wouldn't have put it past you to do something like that and kind of screw over the expectations, because I know the type of guy you are, and you're the type of guy to be like, and we dangle it's over here. No, we're gonna go over here. And that's just type of fun that you would seem to have. But you did it. You screwed with my expectations in a different way, because the whole thing is a holo novel, and I wasn't expecting that because
it's shocking how few people ever see it coming. I've heard maybe a dozen in the hundreds and hundreds of comments I've got, and it's like, it really does. Even though there are clues, very specific clues. Just saying.
So Zam says, "Wacko captains, fuck the world." There you go. There you go, Zam. Star Trek needs more of them. That's exactly it. The thing I loved a lot about this film, and that's one of the things that I want to delve with you. It's very much Voyager kind of turned on its ear. At least I felt he's a captain who's trying to save his crew.
Yep.
For the win, not fuck the world. For the win. Okay, my bad. See, that's why you can't do letters, because people like me, I'm old, and it meant something very different. So thank you, Zam. That's one of the things that it very much took like the premise of Voyager, when you first meet the captain, you're like, I've got to save my crew. And he starts talking about like the Borg. And then he shifts and starts talking about the Cardassians. And you're like, wait, what? And then he starts talking about the Dominion. And you're like, wait, his story is, shifting constantly. And you realize, okay, this dude's wacko. And then you get to the mess hall after he's captured all the other crew. And I think was that your father that played the other guy? I thought it was because I thought I recognized him. And they're having a conversation, and then the guy's gone. And instantly, like, the con badge was different, the uniform was different, so you got the feeling that, is this guy a figment of his imagination? And I love that he's having that conversation, and then he realizes, oh, wait, he's not here. And the guy's so paranoid, so out there. And it reminded me a lot of like Heath Ledger's Joker, where the story keeps changing and you're not really sure what's real. And it really made your antagonist very sympathetic.
Yeah. He's not a villain, he's antagonist. There is depth there.
Yes. And even though it would have been very easy to just, once you realize it's a holodeck adventure, it would have been very easy to just ignore that aspect and stay with the main character. But you didn't do that. You actually stayed with the holodeck character as he's going through the hallway and as he's doing some of the things. And you still made him a real character. And I appreciated that, because at that point in the film, you've already connected with that character. You've already established the fact that you're with that. You've sunk that time into him. Just like with the Lady in Blue, and I'm terrible with names, except for, I remember Harriman, and Archer, because those of course are two names we remember. The other ones I don't remember the name of, except for the crazy captain's ship's the Mako. So
you can just say which era they are, because that's an easy way of
there you go. So the TNG lady, her, like, the fact that we actually stayed with her, and like, as she's like, I'm just gonna go ahead and faint or pass out, like, like, your heart reaches out, you're like, don't do it, don't and you're on the edge of your seat, because like, the other ones are gone, and she's gone too. It's very thrilling to sit there with a group of people that there's not a lot of time spent with them, but there's enough time where they feel like they feel like they're real people. Especially the Excelsior guy. There's not a lot of time, but there's enough where you feel like he's protective of the others. And the thing that I appreciated most about this film is this felt like this could have been a spinoff for all these other characters, where this was like chapter 1, and chapter 2 is going to be like, hey, here's the Excelsior guy, here's the TOS guy, here's the and that I would have been so on board with. Give me more, because I really, given the fact that this was just a holodeck adventure, let's see all those other guys.
Well, you're also meant to get the sense that at the end of the film is that this guy continues to play the simulation for possibly weeks, months, years, because it's an ever evolving situation. So you could have cut back to him and you say 6 months later, and now he's on some broad adventure with, etc., having this really elaborate trip. But no, certainly I think one of the best things that I appreciate from the twist, people have told me, it's not half and half, but it's certainly more on the side I've come from, is that after the reveal, you still care. A lot of people, they can turn off, but they actually stay in and they stay engaged, and that's really, really good. That's why I wanted to happen, because they are close enough real people in the context of it's a fan film. These are fan actors. You've always spent 30 minutes with them. Let's bring us back in and go again, and you still care. That's a real achievement to all the actors and the the writing and direction.
That let's take it back a little bit. Let's start back at the writing process of how did this all evolve? Because obviously, one of the most either loved or hated type of films or episodes of Star Trek are the holodeck adventures. Doing one like this is very risky. Either you're going to love it or you're going to hate it, depending on if you love holodeck adventures. The fact of the matter is, you don't even realize it's a holodeck adventure until 3/4 into the film. It was I think genius on your part, because you don't realize what you're watching until you're into it, and then you're like, well, I love it anyway. Because so what was your inspiration for, one, making it a holodeck adventure, and two, making it this type of psychological film?
So the original impetus was I'd made my Stargate film that came out the year before, and that went really well. People really enjoyed it, and doing what costumes and props we had, make it different, make it interesting. And I knew that second year I wanted to do a Trek one. I didn't always understand how much work was going to go in when I started prepping it. Although in retrospect, I'm glad that I did write it with a, what I wanted to be in mind rather than what I could have done, because obviously as the tech improved, the different quality level just kept jumping to the final release, where the footage luckily was really good because I came from a filmmaking background, even if the backgrounds from version 1 were long since thrown away. So he was able to sort of keep up with my abilities, thank goodness. But I remember thinking, there's never been, in fan films or in real Trek, a true crossover of all the eras. Never. This was long before Discovery, so it was like we have the eras. And I loved Into Mirror Darkly. I loved Trials and Tribulations. These things where they can bring an extra nuance, and in the perspective of our present day heroes in the context of their story, how do they think about these old eras? Because just like we think about 40s differently to how they did at the time, I find that super interesting, and it's things we've thought of. But how would you then write them in? And so I remember thinking, well, okay, great, let's do something like that. But then how can you possibly get them all in the same story? And if you have different ships, then I can't practically make 7 crews. I can't make 7 captains, 7 bridge officers. It's never going to happen. And so the story kind of pretty much, once I know a story that clicks, it clicks in my head. I knew the anomaly, I knew the baseline, and then the sort of twist was logical because it took away the need to actually explain the plot, which helps a lot when you've got a set amount of time you can fill in a story. I thought it was going to be a half-an-hour film originally, but obviously it ended up being 50 minutes. And in fact, the pace is super well structured for an episode of Star Trek. Just, I guess I knew what I was doing when I wrote it. And it's only because of CBS and my direct communication it was split into 2. It had to be, and that was one of our release deals. It never was meant to be 2 parts. And I was lucky there's a sort of point you can split it off on, but it was meant to be one full piece. And I remember thinking, once you make that conceit, you can kind of do anything, but it's still got to be real. It's still got to be, something you want to follow. Then having that reset also makes those secondary scenes a little bit quicker to film. As you kill the characters, it was a really creative chance. While having it is having a cake and eating it too. You can have all this cool creativity while still being actually just about one guy in the holodeck doing a thing. It's super macro and super big at the same time with these cool special effects. I'd never seen a fan film at that point go in the NX-01 engineering room or go on the Enterprise D bridge. It's never been done, and I certainly was one of the first to, or the first to do a lot of those sets. And I think as a fan, I want to see them walk around. I wanted the sense of we can just go between sets and not think anything of it. Especially at that time, green screen fan films were, we have a bridge, we have 5 angles. That's our fan film. That's great, but that is very limited. Whereas I have an entire sequence where Monroe just walks around the Enterprise D, but you feel it. You sense what he's feeling. You get the excitement of, well, where's he going to go next? It isn't limited. You're not, hopefully about 15 minutes in, once the rest of the ships turn up, you sort of stop thinking as a fan film, because you see so much has already happened that's cool. Where else can this go? You're not surprised by the continual new environments, continual new things. And then the twist obviously helps to bring it all together and regrounds it. But yeah, it's just a unique storytelling way, and I'm surprised more people don't do holodeck adventures. They have also their own risks, but I guess my initial script had a good balance, and people seem to like it.
Well, that was the one thing that a lot of people, they write outside their scope. They always think, well, I got to have the biggest fight. I got to have the biggest, uh, they don't write within their means. Like a lot of my films are always going to be, com box films because, I don't have access to, certain sets or background images or whatnot. But the one thing that I liked about this is you wrote within what you had to work with. It's a green screen film, but
Doesn't
you
feel
sort
like
of,
it.
yeah, no, you lose the fact that it is a green screen film. I mean, you can look at it and see that it's a green screen film, but you're so engaged with the characters that you're like, who cares? Like it's enjoyable, and the fact that, like you said, like you're in the engineering room of the NX class ship, you're on the bridge of a Galaxy class ship. One of the things that I loved was, you're sitting there on an Intrepid class ship and the dude's firing at him and it goes through the hologram thing. Like, you don't really see a lot of stuff like that on a fan film, and it's little things like that I appreciate, where, yes, it's easy to nitpick something, in these films and look at the flaws, but I look at something like that and I'm like, not a lot of people did that, especially back. When did you make this film exactly?
Well, I filmed the first part in 2012. That was the primary week shoot. We did 5 days with the entire cast, but the antagonist, he wasn't prepared enough for that week, so we ended up having to film him again the second year, the second summer, and reshoots with our lead actor. And at that point, we had a much better camera because the university had it and a better green screen. So that was really lucky because I was able to actually tweak his dialogue a little bit since I already edited the rest of the film, and kind of, it's small things, but it brought all together. So I filmed over 2 years, a little bit of reshoot half a year later, and then obviously I was editing over the course of 3 years, and then Trekyards slowed me down, and then finally came in 2019. So it was a 5.5 year adventure. But I mean, if you watch the original Kickstarter pitch, which I only raised £1,700, and 600 of that was from family and friends, and I even put some of my own money in. I also client to pay me into the Kickstarter, so really I only made about £800, $800. And the fact is, more than that went on costumes. I spent way more than that. That was just something. Well, I was the second to Kickstart ever, and given that was the first platform, I'm one of the very first crowdfunders ever. I think Deception was very briefly before me. I was then a thing, and then Renegades was just after me. So it was I was right there at the start.
Well, and that's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is, when you make a fan film, like, you put a lot of, like, your own, not only time, but you put a lot of your own money, and you put, like, those two things are,
Well, I mean, these things aren't free.
No,
you have to buy them from somebody.
Well, if you remember, and in fact, some of my films, the film Change, I actually had to use. Do you remember on the Playmates action figures how they had the display stands that looked like those comm badges? In the film Change, I have those, and my thumb is over the little stick up thing that you can plug the action figure into. My thumb is over that, so you can't see it when I put it on the table, like I'm resigning from Starfleet. Like, I had to do that though, so you didn't see that it was like that. Like, I had to fake my way because I didn't have one of those for my uniform, and a lot of times at that time, like, my characters don't have a lot of times my characters don't have rank because pips also cost a lot. Like, those things are pretty expensive.
Well, they're not expensive by themselves, but they mount up very quickly. And when Temporal Anomaly, it's 5-6 characters which all need different badges, different pips. Now, luckily, because of the goodness of people, I got deals on all those things at the time, and that was really good. And in fact, I'll show you that one of my favorite pieces still in my entire collection. This was the most expensive thing we bought by an absolute mile, was our Hero tricorder from the best guys that make it. And this was I think it was $650 at the time. So that's almost the entire Kickstarter in itself. But the hero level of this we see on screen, it absolutely feels real because it's as it was in the show, with no sounds but all the lights. And I remember that showing the cast this was just like, this is a real film. It's like, yes, it's a real film. So then to have this later on and then use it in all the other films, but it's like the value this adds every time it's on screen is so incredible. And then for the Trek shots, I've got to get holsters, proper holsters. So now they go into uniforms, and once you start building up these resources, as you have as well, all the subsequent films become cheaper, and that's
Yeah.
been a thing for Trek shorts, because
Yeah.
the raw physical money isn't necessarily the actors or the pizza you're buying them. To get the props that you want, you buy them once, but if you can use them 4 or 5 times, it just feels better on your soul. And Temporal Anomaly was definitely a, I made all the physical holsters. I made them out of gaffer tape or duct tape and cardboard. You can't tell, they're too far. I was very careful of that. You can't tell. But we had props from my dad's collection. We had the TOS stuff. We had the TNG. We use every single phaser that the people should use. All the Playmate stuff, like you say. But I bought cheap uniforms because it wasn't so much a thing. But I actually had a tailor that I knew, who was a sewing person at university, come and actually tailor them all a little bit per person. Luckily, only 2 of them had to be done because she charged for her time, which is fair enough. But that's why the TOS guy's uniform is the cheapest uniform, but it's properly fitted. And I color graded it. It was a broken yellow in filming. It was an awful yellow, and you can see that in the behind the scenes clips I sent you. Terrible yellow. As I change that and make it look just better in post. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. So
speaking of, let's look at those 3 video clips you sent.
Yeah.
Because I see we're at 35 minutes in, and I feel like if we don't get to those, we're gonna run out of time, and then I'm gonna be like,
really quick fire questions at a certain point, shouldn't we? So I want you to, as well.
Let's get to that. Give me 1 second. Let me pull this up here. And all right, so we're gonna watch these 3 video clips, and here we go.
How could I have any more information? Because you're future man. Great. Well, I'd say this was the Mako's brig. Paramount to anyone who may be hearing this. No, Monroe's disabled my cock.
The brig. Could have guessed that. More silver than our brig. You guys love silver.
What can I say? It's the future.
Any ideas?
All right, and then here's the next one.
The brig. Could have guessed that. More silver than our brig. You guys love silver.
What can I say? It's the future.
Any ideas?
Let's take a look at the situation.
Not very proactive, are you?
Well, what do you want me to do? This is my first time on an Intrepid class Starship.
Archer here, go ahead.
He's on his way.
Showtime.
Oh, no, the buffer's overloading.
What's he got left?
Everything.
Not good enough.
That is awesome. All right, and here's the final one, guys.
A little bit of tactical and engineering training, but isn't that what they always say in the Hollow novels?
Then work with us. Together we can find out what really happened.
Then at least I know she gets out of this.
That's the problem with time travel. Parallel universes, alternate time streams.
Brilliant.
That's the thing I love about behind the scenes stuff is once you like those people that sit and they nitpick the oh, this looks junk, but when you see the love and the commitment and the hard work that goes into making something like this, it to me it's just respect. I love seeing stuff like this where you see both the actors and there's nothing to act against. Like he's looking up, he's like, oh, it's a lot of silver. Like having seen the film just last night, and I'm like, obviously he's looking at the walls, but like seeing right there, he ain't looking at shit.
Only one of them had even seen Star Trek, like beyond more than an episode. So they were all from an actor's point of view, and I'd given them a little briefing of what to expect. But I mean, this was pure acting over fan. They can picture it, and I was directing them pretty hard on a lot of the stuff, as in to try and make sure I got what I wanted. And some fun content. The first clip was obviously a screen reader did for my favorite days, because everyone was so busy, and in fact, Captain Monroe was literally the head of acting at the university. So I got the top guy. I asked him, he auditioned, we got in, and so he was busy, and we all managed to come together for a 3-hour session, and that was just so fun to see it, feel it. Here I am, I'm younger than half the people in this room, directing them, leading them. It's my film, my idea. I've got them all together. It's happening. I've got funded. People believed in me. That was beautiful, and the energy was really, really fantastic. The second clip was every day I would spend up until lunchtime from 9 till 12ish doing the rehearsals, because I thought it'd be really important, and because there's so much movement and swapping between teams, I wanted to give them that. I actually booked out the hall at university, a big hall as you can see, and I put tape on all the floor. I worked out a set arrangement so I could actually walk them and run them between locations. So we literally the entire 50-minute film in sort of staged locations, which they would know to go to. And I could also do some sort of framing and test and have them experience it. And then in full costume, they really liked that as well. Ended up being they didn't think it was as useful as it could have been, because once you're in the green, it's out of context. And I've only heard that in years later. It was great, but didn't really help beyond we got to learn our lines better. It doesn't translate. And the green was obviously there's nothing there, but you forget about the green when you've been looking at the final film for so long.
Well,
Yeah.
Carl Faulkner says that was good, and Zam says I love the pew pews. I think that's one thing. I think that's one thing that I agree with Zam. Hearing the as they're pressing the buttons, and then the space battles and the bodies flying and whatnot. That's one of the things. That's one of the things that it's not always easy to do, and especially on a green screen when you have to do that rock motion. And it's something that I remember watching as a kid, seeing them do that on the bridge where they're like, okay, 3, 2, 1, and rock, and then they would have to do that. And that's we have to do the same thing in what we do. So it's always fun to sit there and watch other people do the same thing, and the pews.
Rehearsals are fun. We can have fun with them.
Yeah. So watching that, and then watching the film, break down the psychology. What exactly, and the story, because I have been dying to dissect this character, the captain of the Mako. Because I honestly, and I'm being straightforward honest with you, I would love to get that actor and do one of my green screen ones with him. Like I have to say, I love that guy's acting. I love what you wrote for him. He's a great actor. That was a great story you did. Like that was my favorite, just because he wasn't the villain. He was the antagonist, and he was tragic, relatable. You don't know what happened. I still don't know. So what exactly did happen to him?
And you can see him again, the real him in Convergence, which is great. The present day real him with a beard and everything. We did film that before pandemic. He's probably changed a bit since, and hopefully he'll be able to join the second shoot. But we have got footage of him, and he was really good to work with again. But the real guy, not the villain. Yeah, and obviously these are hollow characters, but I did actively work out all their life stories. Luckily, they're all ensigns, so that was a shorter life story. But I know when they went to the academy, what things they did, etc. So I did think about it. And from the character Monroe, yes, I have his entire psychology worked out, because he isn't two-dimensional. He is a person who happens to be hollow. It's almost a coincidence, Although I am considering, if I can get him back, to do a joke at one point where we actually. Now this is an exclusive. I'll tell you this, because I've thought about it for like 2 years. Wouldn't it be great to see that actor play Temporal Anomaly? I'd be pissed that they use his likeness to be the villain, and so you've got an older version of him being like, I don't sound like that. I'm not this, and because it's green screen, I could certain scenes I could remove my guy and put this other guy in, and it's like, right. I didn't. Who said? I'm not even complete with Starfleet. I'm not that crazy, because that's a whole story in itself, isn't it?
Right.
His likeness is the villain of the Hollywood story. So this character, James Monroe, obviously talented because he got an Intrepid class, which at the era of that uniform, top tier science ship, super.
Right.
But obviously he's been in Starfleet for a while. I think it's probably his mid-40s, give or take. Good ship, good crew. Obviously values them clearly. And his backstory is that he was so good at what he did, and so proud that his family were also big supporters of it. And his daughter eventually joined Starfleet, and then ended up getting assigned to that ship with him, the Mako. Unfortunately, through one of their missions, this is obviously the real backstory of the real man, but told in the holo novel to the extreme. And there's a mission they went on where a choice that he made got her killed, but saved way more lives. So it's a, you know, the train goes down the track and you pick two choices, both are bad. But, you know, the daughter also helped save the situation. So it's kind of like the Monroe family won out, but she lost her life. And that obviously destroyed him. Less dramatically in the reality than the Holland thing.
Right.
But he, from that point forward, became even more emotionally attached to his crew. And then as the Klingon War started and the Dominion War, which then covers into Convergence slightly, very, very crew focused. You know, just like Janeway kind of got by bonding via them being lost Delta Quadrant. And so when then in the fictional story of the holonovel, he loses crew, he is then feeling all of that previous loss magnified by his entire crew. And then in the context of the story, the temporal anomaly itself is a radiation that's actually affecting his brain because he's older and he's not an ensign, he's an older person. So both his brain is being damaged by it, so his cognitive ability is being corrupted, and he's heightening his emotional loss to the point where he's willing to do whatever he has to do to save his crew because that's what he has to do. It's just, well, I mean, it's also two sides of a story because arguably he's in the right. And I'm very careful with this, and we could easily argue both sides of the view because he is a captain.
Right.
He has the right to order them to whatever they want, and nothing he orders up until a certain point is right, is wrong. And when the ensigns say no, they're now mutinying, right?
Right.
So he has a right to say no when they charge weapons against him, or when he's using force against mutineers. He has a reason, and then the other guys, they shoot at him. So he's just dealing with, and you can't say 21-year-olds no better than a 40-year-old 8 times out of 10, and it's his ship, etc. And so they are arguably in the wrong as well. It's just only later on we realize he's gone a bit wacko, that it's like clearly something else is here. But yeah, so he's emotionally scarred, but also dealing with it. And in Convergence, we deal with that a little bit, where he's found a new figure to impose that father, his new father to somebody else, symbolically, in that, which also links into the story of Convergence. So yeah, does that answer your question?
No, it really does. Like it was very interesting. Like that character, like I said, that was the kind of breakout. Because to me it was like everyone always loves the hero. We love Superman, but we gravitate more toward Lex. We love Batman, but Joker's far more interesting. Cisco's awesome and a badass, but Gul Dukat is far more delicious to watch. We love Garrick. We love kind of the more eccentric type characters, and this guy was definitely the most interesting, I feel, out of everyone there. So on the other characters, not everybody got a lot of screen time, but everybody got enough chance to shine.
Everyone had a moment, and then some people got more than one.
Yes. What was it like for each one of them, one, to be in a Star Trek fan film, and to make sure that they got their moment, and to not get passed up? Because in films like this, it's always easy to just kind of be passed up and to not get their chance. Was that something that you were very consciously aware of, to make sure that they got their chance to shine and to connect with the audience? Or was it something where, when you were like watching the dailies, you were like, nope, we got to go back and fix this? Was it something you were consciously aware of when you were writing it?
I was very ready with the details when I came to shooting. The script was right where I wanted it to be. I had other stuff prepped, etc. So yeah, it all comes from the script of, I knew that everyone should have something to do, very Star Trek 4-esque. And in fact, everybody has a speciality which comes through in the film, and all that was written down in the bios. And so they're able to, utilize that. And obviously, as the characters sort of drop like flies, everyone gets different moments anyway, etc. But no, definitely, everyone has a certain part to play. Everyone has a speciality. Everyone has specific relationships with each other. I wrote those in that come into play at different moments. Those are all in the script and in the performance. And obviously, we had hours of rehearsal as we were going, so we were getting to be, wouldn't necessarily say friends, because they were actors first, and they were there to do not a job, it was all volunteer, because there was acting students. But we definitely became a team, and we're definitely working really hard. And yes, they didn't know what they were doing a lot of the time, contextually, but those of us that did kind of work out what things and what torpedoes were, we were able to say, oh, try it this way, and the impetus of that. But at the end of the day, once you get past a certain point in the film, it's very relatable. It's just the people dealing with the situation that you don't need to be a Star Trek fan to get. It just happens to be on these many ships. So they all kind of got that. And certainly they all had to be important for two reasons. One, why is an actor there if not to add something? Otherwise, why even be there? And that was very keen on my mind. I like to say I'm an actor's director because if you're in one of my films, there's a reason for you to be there. You've got something to chew on. But two, this is not reality. This is a hollow novel where every character's been put there for a purpose. And so therefore, every character has to have a purpose for the lead. So there's actually a functional purpose to every character in the story. And everyone, so it's, like levels in a video game. They all are quest givers and they all do something. So it's both intentional in one way and meta, which is another part of why I like the construction, because it is very needed. Harriman, he's a big fan of the Enterprises. That's the point of the whole novel, is to learn about the Enterprises in an organic way. You don't have to. You can just walk on the bridge of the E or talk, well, not the E, but the D, or talk to someone who worked on the D. Because every character in the film is an existent character in the Trek universe except Monroe. Susan Dumont was the lady that Wesley wanted to date with once, so she was on Enterprise D. Rachel Keeler was in X-01, mentioned in dialogue but never seen in the X-01. And the Excelsior was more for the later Enterprise B stuff. So everyone had a connection with the Enterprise. Edward Keller was an Enterprise. He just moved to Excelsior. Yeah. So everyone was there for a reason. And so the fun of that was, in the script, and everyone knew they were adding something. I think that came across.
So, and that was the one thing that I enjoyed about this film. The characters that came across as, having spent time not only in the Trek universe, but like the actors, they came across as having spent that time, the camaraderie. These characters came across as real people in this universe. These are people that at the end of the adventure, it kind of came across as these guys would be friends. And that always seems to be, your kind of best type adventures. Take the Lower Decks episode of Next Generation. Characters that we didn't even know, that you're looking at things through a completely different lens. And, because we never met any of those characters, except for the one lady who was a cadet in First Duty. And, we didn't know any of those guys, but yet they felt very real to us. And that's very much what this felt like. Even though they were all from different eras, they all had their connection in some way or another. You could tell the kind of irritation of Archer of having that name, like, dude, just get off it. Don't talk about it. It's like that, more, takes shame or irritation. And it's just like,
well, can you imagine being that guy? And he really liked that backstory. His granddad. So he knew his granddad. This is not like long time ago. Unlike Harriman, who didn't actually know. He may have just known him, but And so your granddad is literally this famous guy in the Federation, which is the primary thing that everyone talks about on Earth. And obviously there's no other archers, so everyone's like, "Oh, you ready to?" Yes, I'm ready to arch. And he actually didn't join the academy until later because he just didn't want to. He tried being a trader for a while, tried doing other stuff and doing civilian corps, and it didn't suit him because he didn't feel he was making enough of an impact to the universe. And so he finally gave in, joined Starfleet, but he actively avoids that because he feels like anything he does will be overshadowed by his granddad, because unfortunately, how could it not be? The next Obama child will be unfortunately linked to, well, you're only a postman, Obama's son,
right.
That's life. Any Picard, any Kirk is going to be whatever. We will hopefully, he's in Indiegogo. We'll see more of Archer, much older, when he's actually come to terms with that more. Because at a certain point, I think everyone just finds their own way and doesn't need to be defined by their past and can embrace it. Or at least I hope everyone will. It's sad if you can't. And so we'll see kind of a more mature version of that when we see him again.
Well, it really reminded me, like, I had watched about a week ago a movie that I hadn't seen in like a decade called Office Space. I don't know if you've ever seen that before.
Maybe.
But there's a character in there who has the name Michael Bolton, and everyone's always like, "Oh, are you related to the other Michael Bolton?" He's like, "Fuck no, I'm not. No, he has my name." They're like, "Why don't you just go by Mike?" And he's like, "Why don't he go by Mike? It's my name too.
Yeah.
Screw him." And that's kind of what this reminded me of. It's like the same guy who's like, "Oh, fuck, it's no, like
everyone asks.
Yeah. Everyone always said, and so I really appreciated that joke because I find it very funny where he's just like, no matter where he goes, he can't get away from it, can't escape
and that's
it.
why he's busy, because he has to forge his own way, and so he's more defensive, he's more reactionary. Whereas Harriman, I always had a soft spot for Alan Ruck, who played John Harriman in Generations, because even though the film presents him, or at least the situation, as inept, the reality is he would not get command of the next Enterprise after Kirk, the most prestigious ship for the last 100 years, unless he was the guy for the job. So he must have been, and that young as well, really talented. He was just out of his depth in that situation, which he had nothing to do. There's not much he could have done anyway. Even Kirk, he is Scotty, and so it was a context thing. I think he was better than everyone lets him believe. And then he was Enterprise B captain for quite a while after that. He still got Enterprise captains. I mean, six captains of Enterprise. Whatever happens, it's still a prestigious role to be. And so I like Sam Harriman being very proud of that, to the point where he wants to connect with his great granddad, because he's got an Enterprise D and then E. But in fact, that's the last scene of Temporal Anomaly. He literally, in his entire life, even though he could have his entire life, never turned on the holodeck and said, "Show me John Harriman." He never felt he connected enough to who he was and to understand it. So it took dealing with Temporal Anomaly thing to finally say, yes, let me go introduce myself to Hollow John Harriman. And so that moment's meant to be like, I finally get to, that's like the crescendo of my journey I've had my entire life that no one really cares about, but I've kept waiting until I was ready, So that was a big moment for me. And in the original cut for I talked to CBS, there was actually rotoscoped Alan Ruck. It was built around the idea that I could put Alan Ruck in the scene, because there's clips of Generations where he's smiling, and it's much better when Alan Ruck's in the scene, because it was designed with Alan Ruck in the scene. Oh well, but that's how it's built.
Well, I do before because we're approaching the 1 hour mark. But I
questions. You got some quick questions. I give quick answers.
No one's put any. If anyone has any questions in the chat, feel free to put them in there, guys. We're all for. I know Zam, you probably have some questions. Cousin Cheeto, I know you probably have some. So anyone, feel free.
Have you seen the film yet? Because spoilers.
What's that now?
Have they even seen the film yet? Because spoilers.
So. They'll be fine.
Okay. The film you shouldn't really spoil. Is just
watch the film, guys. One thing I did enjoy, I loved the fact that you put a nod to the fan film
of Gods and Men.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was not early fan films per se, but it was before the explosion of the Kickstart era, the Indiegogo era, and so I was very conscious of I'm part of this community, even though I'm fresh to it. And so the reason Excalibur was picked, because there was Star Trek Excalibur. The team was, several years into not making an episode, but they were still active at that point, despite not releasing anything. And so that's why I had the ship 1705, because that was their choice of Excalibur over the 1785. I just thought it sounded better. So that's a direct reference to them, out of respect. And then Gods and Men, I thoroughly enjoyed Gods and Men, and so I thought double down on a reference at the end was a nice way to end that most people don't get, but if you get it, boy, you think you're smart, because it's right there. It's right there.
Right.
But,
right.
Got to think about it for a second.
So STE asks, ETA on Sam's next episode?
Well, we released our bonus one, Hours at Warp, during the campaign, because an actor got COVID, but we still had things budgeted to film that day, so we still filmed. I wrote something, and within 1 hour of them, the travel time between their house and the studio, we filmed that, edited it, that came out. So there is a second episode already with Sam Harriman back again, but actually before, even though he's 10 years older. But yes, next episode will come out in December, between Christmas and New Year's is my aim. It's going to be the one I was able to announce on the Trek Zone podcast, the One Small Step, which is the very first introductional, in terms of her timeline, Anna Keeley, who's the female lead of the Trek Shorts projects, and that is her very first chronological, where she's the youngest. She's straight out of the academy. It's DS9 focused, Defiant focused, a lot of fun, and also includes an Avalon cameo, or Avalon character, or at least Avalon actor, which is great. As you know, all of my Trek Shorts are meant to be crossovers in one way or another, to try and bring people together and utilize their wonderful canon. And so yeah, hopefully that time. And then I've been filming constantly for the last 5 months, so I've got a lot of stuff filmed. The aim is to film and then edit once it's all filmed, and there'll be pretty consistent release after that. But yeah, next one should be between Christmas and New Year's.
Zam says, Sam, you think Prodigy will inspire a new generation of Star Trek fans, or should new generations watch TOS and TNG like we did as kids?
Great question. Yeah, I like shows that are sort of for everybody. TOS was not for kids, it wasn't for adults, it was for everybody, and it inspired astronauts, literally. I don't think Discovery is going to inspire anybody to be astronauts. It's not that sort of thing. It doesn't have any aspirational, or it's not that sort of show. Until we see Prodigy, we can't know. If it's just fun for kids, then they'll like it and maybe watch other Trek. I'm assuming it's going to be very like kids are strong, kids are great, so it'll probably inspire. But obviously they're all aliens anyway, so there's a slight disconnect. But hey, if kids enjoy it, they'll probably watch other Trek, because if you like Trek as a kid, once you grow up you like everything else, because it's all still good.
Hey, I have a personal question. What is your favorite fan film, just in general? Not one that you've done, but just like in general. If you had to pick one to live and breathe.
I mean, one is always like, can I give you my top and a quick reason why? Because there's so many different ones.
Sure.
Of Gods and Men, because it was the first of its kind, and I think it's a great story, and we never got to see as actors again in that way. That's a special one for me, of Gods and Men. I think the last episode of Continues is like probably the best fan film of all time, because it just is everything you want. Like, wow, that was impressive. I really like working on Renegades. That was a personal experience. I did a bit for that, so I really liked the idea of the story, even if it didn't follow over. And there's another smaller one I'm blanking on, but there's a small one I really like that I can't remember the name of, which is annoying.
All right. Well, if you remember, come back to that. We have another question from STE. Says USS Eagle here. How do you both feel about having Star Trek Online era in fan films?
You can go first.
I'm indifferent to it. My thing is this. My next season in Constar, I'm going to have the link.
So you retired for the 7th time?
8th time. So, come on, get with the program, Sam. I have weekly retirement, summits. So come on,
You just want the cake at the party, don't you?
Exactly. My next season of Constar is going to have the Link sword and the Thanos glove. So like you're talking about the Star Trek Online. It's it's all fair game to me at this point. It's like crossing streams. So to me, my thing is, if you're making a fan film, make a fan film. I don't care what you put in it. As long as you're making it, that's good. If it's green screen, if it's live set, if you can only film it outside, as long as you're making it and you're being creative, tell the story you want to tell. If you're wearing authentic uniforms, if you're wearing a t-shirt from Target, who cares? As long as you're making it, great. So my thing is, I know Jonathan Lane has the mentality of there's no such thing as a bad fan film. I don't agree with that, because I've made some bad fan films, but I think they should be made. And I think, they're all enjoyable, even if it's just for inspiration for someone else to make something. Because I've watched some bad fan films and gone, I could do that better. I'm going to try my hand at it. And I've watched some good fan films that I'm like, shit, man, I don't see anything good in that. So, and I'll go try my look at it. So I think it's all good, in that regard. So.
Yeah, I mean, fan films are tricky because you need to know why you're doing it and who you're doing it for. If you're doing it for yourself, like I said, anything is fun. Like for your own YouTube channel, you expect 300 views, that's great. If you want to feel like it's canon, and for fans to be like, that feels like an episode of Star Trek, then obviously keep yourself to certain standards, because, like you said, the Thanos glove wouldn't appear in canon, So that takes you out of that range of fan films. If you want to work with another fan films canon, like I try and do, you've got to be a bit more precise because everything's got to kind of match up so it all kind of feels consistent. But that's a different objective. Like if you know you're going to do a series, think about that, or a collection of films. Star Trek Online is tricky because they have literally everything. It's a roller coaster theme park. You could walk around in TNG, Voyager, DS9 uniform, all on a 2409 ship, and no one bats an eyelid because it's an option. So STO is too broad. They've had 19 wars, they've had 17 temporal versions. It's too broad to be specifically in, like, you can't include that in the Trek canon because it is everything. That's the whole point. It's this big playground. Even including Picard is a question because they might retcon it in season 2 because they've got different writers. That might be changed. So, I if you want to use a story, sure, but take everything Star Trek Online as a pick and choose. They don't even know their own canon because it's so broad. And as soon as Ichev got killed, they removed him from their game because, well, he's not alive in their future, but also they fight tardigrades in their version. It's confusing. It's a game. It's fun. Now, what's funner is to use games like Armada 2 and say, let's take a villain from Armada 2 or Elite Force. Now, that for me would be really fun. Like Monroe is a reference directly to Alex Monroe from Elite Force 1 because I adore that game, and so I wanted to pay reverence to that. Do that. Star Trek Online is a thing of itself. But look at the other video games. Pull from them.
See, I used to play Armada 1. I used to hack into it, make the Borg like super strong, like the Borg actually are, so you couldn't defeat them. So when they actually showed up, because I had a mod version of it, so when they showed up, they were actual threat. It was like, oh shit. I mean, I always lost because but it was like building your empire up until the Borg came. I mean, it was so much fun.
When do I die is the question.
Yeah, exactly.
Not how long do I live.
Exactly.
I modded the shit out of those games. There's so much of them.
Yeah. So Sci-Fi Nation says, Sam, any predictions on Strange New Worlds, and do you think it has any potential to ignite or reignite a passion for TOS era Trek for old and new fans alike?
Yes, although it won't be TOS era Trek, it'll be Discovery era future Trek. Because we ain't getting TOS Trek except in lower decks because they want this new audience. So don't expect, it's not TOS, it's Discovery era future TOS.
Right.
Pull those out of your mind. But
right.
I'm excited for it. As long as you say, okay, well, the visuals aren't really necessarily canon because, well, they can't all exist. I mean, the Enterprise can't be 3 times the size and then shrink, whatever. Right. So I think the actors mean really well, and that's important.
Right.
I think the writers have planned the entire season. That's really important. But I do think it will be. Don't expect it to be the show we all want for canon, etc. Just go in and say visually, not gonna line up. Don't even think about it. It's not going to. But if the stories are really good, that'll be fun to watch. But yeah, don't expect it to be the Holy Grail. Just expect it to be a fun ride, and hope that they don't make every season be a year in the universe. They've only got 4 seasons, and then TOS has to happen, and they aren't going to line up with TOS. Whatever you say, Curzon said it in season 1 Discovery, he lied. Doesn't line up with Discovery canon, whatever. Just enjoy the ride and watch Lower Decks for everything else.
Right. So. Last question we'll get to here, and then we'll cut it short because we're a little over our time, but I'm enjoying this with you, Sam. And to remind everybody, every Wednesday for October, we're doing Samtober, which is me and Sam chit-chatting about a certain film of his, and then doing what we've done today, which is asking some questions, diving into his films, and just talking Trek in general.
And what's really special about these is that obviously I did my first film and now my latest films, but in between I worked on other people's films. And no one's asked me about Glenn Wolfe's first 3 films I worked on, or Ray Tessie's film. So I'm really excited to talk to you about these projects that are of the past now, but have my earliest work, have the ideas. I've worked with those teams, I've worked with pretty much everyone in fan films. So I'm giving those guys the credit through my work, obviously. That's the lens we're looking at. But that's the middle we're going to talk about for those 2 Wednesdays. Like all these other cool things I've worked on. There's a lot.
Well, and see, for me, these are the type of things that I love digging deep, because it's like, I could sit there and probably talk another half hour about Monroe,
Yeah, so could I.
It's like, I love it, because again, like, I think I found one of my new favorite characters in fan films. And I'm not saying that just because you're here. I found a character that I'm like, man, I really want to go work with that dude, like, man, like, I mean, that's
because you see the good captain underneath the insanity. Yeah. You see Starfleet and the situation, and exactly.
Yeah, you see, yeah, I see potential for like, man, if like, hey Sam, go write something, like put me in something, like, dude, I see, like, I just potential, man. I love it. But so last question.
Yeah.
Zam says, you think we will ever get to Trek shows on other races like Klingons, for example, have it from their point of view?
Well, I know Stuart's not a fan of the Captain Worf show. I would be a fan of the Captain Worf show. I think that's a great idea. DS9 did some fantastic singular Klingon episodes. I think what we've learned from Picard especially is that a lot of Trek needs to be through the prism of the Federation aesthetic to kind of ground what we know, what we've seen. If you go too far out, at a certain point, it doesn't even feel like
doesn't work.
The ships, the uniforms, it's just a few people we know walking through a world we don't recognize. And then you have Raffi be 15 miles from LA and yet in a slum. It's like, it's not even logical, let alone
it's like in a trailer like what I live in. Like, what the
yeah, it's nonsensical, whatever. So I think, yes, in terms of like a Andorian-led next gen era captain on a small ship, Federation ship, and they've got mostly Andorians and some Tellarites and a few humans. So it's still, from the Andorians' perspective, socially and culturally, I don't think it would work to do like a six episode series on Andorian, Kamari, and Enterprise without a really strong story, which, is timed out. You do a really strong story. But I think all of those things give them like a TV movie. And I've said this: we don't want a Section 31 show. TV movie, yeah, actually, give us a single really strong story that lets us do those things, and then you can have one-off amazing things. An episode of Discovery is almost a full TV movie budget in and of itself, and a two-parter, you've got all the budget you need. Let's be honest, to make a decent TV movie. So yeah, tell us an Andorian thing, but they're very what they want to do. They don't necessarily do what the fans have ideas for, but it could be fun. There's always story comes first, so think of a really good story and see where it goes.
Well, I think I think the one thing I think that they're doing right now, like whether you love every incarnation of Star Trek or you hate it, at least they're putting out new content. Because I remember for 15 years, 10 years,
well,
long.
It was 5 years until JJ, so actually it wasn't as long as you think, and it was every 3 years or 2 years for that.
Felt that way. It was like for the longest time there was nothing. Well, TV series wise, there was nothing. Because I'm sorry, but I don't feel that Star Trek is good on the big screen. I don't feel like it belongs. I feel like Star Trek is something that belongs on the small screen, regardless of whether it's a stream or cable or whatnot. To me, that's irrelevant. Doesn't matter, because I think today's market kind of lends itself more towards streaming services. I don't have cable myself, so the argument of cable or streaming doesn't really matter to me. But I feel like it belongs on the small screen. I don't feel like it belongs solely on the big screen. If we get a movie, awesome, great, But I think the fact that we have so many options, I think that's a good thing, because it's kind of like a buffet. What do I want to eat? Do I want the pizza? Do I want the chicken nuggets? Do I want the overly gross boiled hot dog that starting to turn green? It's a taste for everybody.
Or if you're Trekyards, we have to review them all.
There you go.
Too much.
There you go, man. So with that being said, I think I'll let you go for the day, and we'll see you next week. Now, what are we watching, what are we discussing next week? What film?
My first couple of films in the fan film community, so that'll be Republic. So it was yesterday. I guess Glenn's. Obviously the effects more than anything else. We'll talk about some of Glenn's first films, Romulan War probably, because that I've been on for 3 years now. So we kind of those initial ones that I sort of had a legacy with, and Romulan War probably I guess be the big one there, because that I've done 500, 400, 300 shots for probably. And obviously part one you can watch and just there's a lot of Sam in that. There's a lot of Sam. So yeah, probably Romulan War as a primary.
Okay, awesome. Well then, everybody, don't forget, next Wednesday is week 2 of Samtober. Please join us, 1:00. And with that being said, Sam, I want to thank you for joining me today. Everybody in the comments, thank you. Don't forget, hit the like and subscribe button here. Go over to the Trekyards. I will put the link to their YouTube in the description here once the video uploads to YouTube. So go over there, hit subscribe, leave them a comment on one of their videos. Watch their stuff. They got good stuff all the time. They put stuff out, several times a week. They're always chatting Star Trek stuff, so it's good content. They're good people. Him and Captain Foley, they're great guys. So with that being said, everybody, thanks for joining us. Be genuine, be safe, and keep on geeking on, guys.
Bye, guys.